How could this happen? My hands trembled as I read the letter, the paper crinkling under my white-knuckled grip. It was a joke, a sick, twisted joke, wasn't it? One moment I'm standing on the tarmac, the familiar Texas sun on my face after a 15-month deployment, and the next, I'm staring at a formal notice from the Cypress Creek Estates Homeowners Association, informing me that my ranch-me inheritance, my home, my sanctuary had been foreclosed upon and sold. Sold. How could you sell a man's home while he's serving his country? A low growl rumbled in my chest, a primal sound of betrayal. I didn't even knock on my own door, I just stood there, staring at the manicured lawn that once held my wild-growing wildflowers, the perfectly painted fence that used to be a little weathered, a little more me. A strange truck was in the driveway. The mailbox, which my grandfather had made by hand, was gone, replaced by some generic, polished metal monstrosity. The world felt wrong. My world had been turned upside down, but this wasn't some combat zone, this was my home. My God, what did they do? The shock quickly morphed into a cold, focused fury. I had to get answers. I called the HOA office. Cypress Creek Estates, this is Eleanor, a voice chirped, dripping with condescending sweetness. I knew that voice. It was Mrs. Vance, president of the HOA, a woman who treated a missing trash can lid like a federal offense. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Mrs. Vance, I began, my voice tight and strained, this is Caleb Stone. I just got home, and I received a notice about my ranch. It says it's been sold. There was a pause, a pregnant, satisfied silence on the other end. Then, a sigh. A theatrical, put-upon sigh. Major Stone, she said, and my blood ran cold as she used my rank like an insult, we sent you multiple notices. You failed to pay your dues, you neglected the property, and frankly, it became an eyesore for the neighborhood. We had to take action. It was a unanimous vote by the board. Neglected? I had arranged for a groundskeeper to maintain everything. The dues were on auto pay. A wave of nausea hit me. This couldn't be right. The groundskeeper. Marcus. Did he not? I stammered. Oh, that poor dear, she interrupted, her voice now a saccharine pretense of pity. He said you let him go months ago. It's a shame, really, such a lovely little place. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had been paying Marcus's salary every month from my combat pay. I had the records. The truth was starting to glimmer through the fog of my fury, a sharp, ugly truth about forged signatures and a woman's desire for control. I hung up without another word, my mind racing. I wasn't just a soldier, I was a man of logic and law. I had a duty to my country, and now, a new, more personal duty to my home. I contacted my old CO, a general I'd served under for years, and explained the situation. He listened, his silence a heavy weight on the line, and when he spoke, his voice was low and firm. Son, that's not just a civil matter. That's a breach of trust, and frankly, a disgrace to your service. He put me in touch with the Army's legal team and, more importantly, with 2 military police officers. I wasn't going to just get a lawyer, I was going to make a statement. A statement that you don't mess with a soldier's home. The day came, and I stood on the street in front of my own ranch, the 2 MPs flanking me like stone statues. Their crisp uniforms and unblinking stares were a stark contrast to the perfectly curated, passive-aggressive landscape of the HOA. A new family, the Davidsons, a young couple with a small child, were in the yard. They looked at me with confusion, then a flicker of fear. This wasn't their fault, I knew. They were the pawns in this woman's twisted game. Mrs. Vance saw us from her window across the street. She marched out, her arms crossed, a sneer plastered on her face, and her voice a sharp, cutting blade. What is the meaning of this, Major Stone? Are you trying to intimidate a new family? This is harassment, she shrieked, the sound echoing through the quiet street. My heart ached for the Davidsons, who were now watching, their faces pale. I didn't look at her. I looked at them. "Ma'am," I said to the young woman, my voice calm but laced with an unshakable authority, "I'm Major Caleb Stone. This is my home. There's been a terrible mistake." The young woman's husband stepped forward, his eyes wide. We bought this from the HOA. We have the deed. And you'll have your money back, I promise you," I told him, looking him straight in the eyes. Then, I turned to Mrs. Vance. The two MPs took a synchronized step forward, their posture a silent warning. I held up a sheaf of papers. "These are my payment records. These are the notarized contracts with my groundskeeper. And this," I said, a grim smile touching my lips, "is a legal order from the Department of Defense to seize this property under federal law, due to fraud committed against a deployed serviceman." The air was thick with tension. A collective gasp went through the small crowd of neighbors gathering on their lawns. Mrs. Vance's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a stark, terrified blankness. Her carefully constructed facade was cracking, revealing the panicked, insecure woman underneath. That's ridiculous. You can't just do that. This is a neighborhood matter," she stuttered, her voice losing its sharp edge, replaced by a desperate, panicked whimper. My eyes narrowed. "This stopped being a neighborhood matter the moment you defrauded a soldier. You knowingly sold my property using forged documents and false claims. That's a federal crime, ma'am." The young woman, the new homeowner, began to cry softly, her husband holding her tight. I felt a surge of pity for them. They were caught in her web of lies. One of the MPs stepped forward, his voice a low, gravelly monotone. "Mrs. Vance, we have an affidavit from the groundskeeper, Mr. Marcus, stating that you threatened him and paid him to keep quiet. We also have a statement from the notary public who was coerced into falsifying documents. You are to cease all operations and turn over all records to the military police. You are under investigation for fraud and multiple civil violations." The spell was broken. The neighbors, who had once cowed under her authoritarian gaze, began to mutter. The whispers turned into a low hum of outrage. They had all been afraid of her, and now, they saw the truth. They saw the ugly, selfish woman who had abused her power, preying on a soldier who was unable to defend himself. The sight of Mrs. Vance, this Karen, who ruled our little community with an iron fist, finally breaking, was a bittersweet victory. She collapsed onto her own perfectly manicured lawn, her hands covering her face, not with shame, but with the utter shock of her world coming undone. She was no longer a queen, she was just a small, broken woman whose petty tyranny had led to her undoing. The Davidsons looked at me, a silent apology in their eyes. "We're so sorry," the husband whispered. "We had no idea." I just nodded, a weary but genuine smile on my face. "It's not your fault. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I gave them my contact info and assured them I would help them get their money back and find a new home. The community, once divided and intimidated, seemed to come alive. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to came up to me, shaking my hand, some with tears in their eyes, thanking me for standing up to her. It wasn't about me anymore, it was about all of them, about reclaiming their community from a bully. That night, I slept in my own bed, the scent of fresh pine and old memories filling my lungs. The ranch felt like mine again, but it was more than that. It was a place of new beginnings, a place where justice had been served, not by a lawyer, but by a soldier fighting for what was right. It was a reminder that sometimes, the greatest battles are fought not on foreign soil, but right here at home, for the very things we hold most dear. What would you have done in my position? And what do you think is the right thing to do when faced with a situation like this? Where do you draw the line between following the rules and standing up for what's right?